guys, welcome to week 6. Today our question is, what were the political implications of the enlightenment? This is the second week that we're talking about the implications of the enlightenment because they're so important. So last week we talked about the cultural, this week we're talking about the political implications. So although the Enlightenment is often seen as only a change in European worldview, the Enlightenment ramifications went way beyond just affecting the European worldview. It also changed political landscape in Europe, and politics were transformed from traditionalism to rationalism. So our 3 points are that the Enlightenment, firstly, reframed political philosophy. Second, the Enlightenment impacted European perspective on colonization. And then thirdly, the Enlightenment led to the French and American revolutions. So firstly, we see this change in political power structures and political philosophy that all occurs because of the Enlightenment. Monarchy's power was no longer absolute. It relied on laws. It relied on unwritten and written laws that were dictated by rationality instead of just, yo, I'm the king's son, therefore when I become king, y'all better listen to me. Stuff wasn't like that anymore. It wasn't that simple. The Enlightenment introduced the idea of government as a social contract, and it separated the church and state in a new way. So let's talk a little bit about social contract and what the political philosophy of the Enlightenment said about this. So we have this guy, Thomas Hobbes, and he used the scientific method in his political philosophy. And in his book, Leviathan, he argued that government was created out of fear and used for self-preservation. So basically, we only have government because we are afraid of each other and we need protection, and that's why we have government. So that's what Hobbes says, and this is his basis for his political theory. It's all based on the idea of fear. And we have a quote from a poem by Hobbes, and he says, Hereupon it was my mother dear, did bring forth twins at once, both me and fear. For this my country's foes I e'er did hate, with calm and peace and my muse associate. So Hobbes really relies on the idea of self-protection in his political theory. This is kind of what the whole Enlightenment says as well. This idea, people are obsessed with self-interest. Adam Smith, it also impacted economic thought of the time, and Adam Smith, a British economist and philosopher, says that the Enlightenment, quote, sought to explain the laws that govern economic systems. He said that self-interest was a driving force between economic exchanges. So Smith, this economist, he believes that really humans needed to preserve something, and that leads them to the formation of a political system designed to protect that something that they need to protect. he basically says humans are individualistic creatures bent on protection and self-preservation. And this is the political thought. And then we also have Kantianism and utilitarianism. And we talked about these a little bit last week, so I'm not going to go over everything, but let's review in our minds what utilitarianism is, because it's going to be important in our next point. Utilitarianism is the idea that our decisions are based on trying to have the best possible outcome and minimize any bad outcomes. So in this utilitarianism view, we look at our decisions and our actions based on the consequences that are yielded from the actions. And this utilitarianism plays a role in colonialism, which leads us to just segues so perfectly into our next point, which is that the Enlightenment really it impacted European perspective, and it encouraged colonial enterprise. So, as we talked about, the political thought in the Enlightenment talked a lot about self-preservation and self-interest, and this affected human interaction and therefore colonialization. Europeans saw themselves as superior to their other counterparts, and this is really interesting, and we get an idea of just how superior Europeans thought of themselves in this quote from David Hume, who was of the Enlightenment time, and he says that, quote, "I am apt to suspect the Negroes and in general all the other species of men to be naturally inferior to the whites. There was never a civilized nation of any other comparison than complexion than white." He's basically saying that white people, there's only examples of white people in government and in charge of the world, so basically everyone else is inferior. And Abby Raynal describes the impact of the New World and the discovery of the New World, and he says that, quote, "a revolution in the balance of power and in the customs, the industries, and the government of every nation. It was through this event, the event of the New World being found, that men in the most distant lands were linked by new relationships and new needs." We see colonialization being thought of as a good thing, not as a bad thing, and it all comes from the Enlightenment perspective of utilitarianism. We see colonizers' worldview in James Milton and his story. So he's this thinker, and he wrote 6 volumes on the history of India. Now, he never visited India, yet he wrote 6 volumes of India's history. So this is already a little iffy as it is, and doesn't really sit right with modern minds, but in the mind of the people of the time, he was a really renowned writer. He knew about India, even though he'd never actually been. He pieced together this history using his utilitarianism mindset and worldview, and he said that stupid, whatever my neighbor's doing outside is really loud. But yeah, basically James Mills writes about India, and he states that India needed colonization because it was not mature enough on its own to self-govern, and any progress made in Indian society was due to the colonization. And yeah, that's our second point, how the Enlightenment and colonization were connected. And then thirdly, before my battery runs out, we're going to talk about revolution and the Enlightenment. This will be really quick. But basically, the intellectuals and the normal people around the Enlightenment time were really influenced by the Enlightenment, and this led to the American and the French revolutions. And people from America and from France wanted new government systems. They saw what the Enlightenment was saying, and they wanted to make governments out of all the Enlightenment ideals. They wanted to form new government systems and get rid of monarchy. And one of the most influential figures of the Enlightenment really can be credited for the ideas that started the United States. And John Locke is his name, this guy that we're going to be talking about, and he really redefined the nature of government. And in Locke's view, this is a quote from the slides, a ruler gains authority through the consent of the government. And Locke argues that the purpose for government is to protect people's rights. Those rights are liberty, life, and property. We see this in our own Thomas Jefferson and in the Constitution, all these things that are based on life, liberty, and for Thomas Jefferson, the pursuit of happiness. But these are all Enlightenment ideals, and John Locke really starts all of these when he says that government is based on protecting people's rights, which is the foundation for America. Benjamin Franklin is another Enlightenment thinker, and he is essentially the embodiment of all of the Enlightenment. We see this in his lengthy career and his multiple careers as a politician, as a scientist, librarian, writer, poet, all of these things that Franklin did. And in all this, and in his embodiment of the Enlightenment, he brings Enlightenment thought to the United States. And also Thomas Jefferson, who I mentioned was influenced by Locke. He has this essay that he brings to the First Continental Congress, in which he addresses slavery and says and talks about authority and what the Enlightenment said about authority. So in his essay, Thomas Jefferson says that, quote, "The abolishment of domestic slavery is the great object of desire in these colonies, end quote." So that is how the revolutions and Enlightenment are connected, thanks kind of to John Locke, who gives us these ideas about the rights and the need to protect the rights of people, which makes America's government today. So anyway, before my battery runs out, what were the political implications of the Enlightenment? Firstly, it reframed political philosophy. Second, it impacted European perspective on colonization. And third, it led to the American and French revolutions. Thank you for listening. I hope you're having a good week, and I will see you guys next time to talk about the Congress system. Bye!